Hi guys, today we'll be looking at the different techniques of penetrant testing, PT, which we also call the DPI method or the liquid penetrant testing method. This video is just going to be an overview of the different techniques. We're not going in depth, just to look at what differentiates between one and the other and how to do them, just to have a conceptual idea. So let's dive into it. Now we'll look at the various techniques for the penetrant testing NDT method. Normally, I will use this illustration of TMF, which is the type, the method, and the form. The type is usually related to the viewing condition. The method is related to the penetrant, while the form is related to the developer. So when we say type, how do you view the result of your NPR? The type is usually classified into type 1, which is the fluorescent, type 2, which is the visible, type 3, which is the mist. The mist is a recent addition to the type. Normally, it's usually type 1 and 2. So, when you go to the method, it tells you how do you remove excess penetrant when you have applied the penetrant, because we know our penetrant testing method is you do your pre-cleaning, you do your penetrant application, then you remove your excess penetrant, then you apply your developer, then eventually you view to get your results. So you do your pre-cleaning. So if this is a material that I'm trying to say, I'm trying to inspect this plate, I'll first clean it before I start. You apply the penetrant, you allow it to dwell for some time, then you remove the excess penetrant. The method of removing the excess penetrant is what gives rise to the method. And that is classified under water-washable. In that case, after applying the penetrant, allowing it to dwell, you use water to take out the excess. It's that simple. Water-washable. From then, it was developed further. You got a new set of penetrants that use what we call post-emulsifiable liquid. In this case, after applying your penetrant, in order for you to easily wash it off with water, because apart from the method C, the other three methods of excess penetrant removal is dependent on you using water to clean off the final result. So in the case of post-emulsifiable lipophilic, you apply the penetrant, which is usually a kind of a greasy chemical in this case. You apply the emulsifier, the lipophilic emulsifier. The lipophilic emulsifier will now react with the excess penetrant before you wash it off. Then we have the solvent-removable, which is the one that is most common. After applying your penetrant, you allow it to dwell for some time. Then you use your remover, which is usually a solvent remover. You use it to clean off the excess penetrant. Then you have the final one, which is the post-emulsifiable hydrophilic. It's still the same emulsifiable penetrant, which means you need an external emulsifier, an external chemical to make the emulsifier washable. But in this case, hydrophilic means water loving. Lipophilic means chemical loving. So in the case of hydrophilic, you apply your emulsifier, which is water based, then you use water to wash off the excess penetrant that has mixed with the emulsifier. That gives us the different method. Now, in terms of sensitivity, as you go downward down the methods, it becomes more sensitive, which means the post-emulsifiable hydrophilic is the most sensitive, especially when you use it with the type 1 viewing method, which is the fluorescent. Now, when we now talk about technique, before now it used to be 6 techniques, because the post-emulsifiables, that is B and D, are usually classified as one method. But over time, it has been split to 8. But you still find some old questions that will ask you how many methods are there in the penetrant testing method, where the options are limited to only 6, you can take 6. But when you have 8, it becomes 8 because you can combine type 1 to method 1. That is 1A. In this case, you are using fluorescent water washable. If I use 2A, it becomes visible water washable. If I go to 1B, it becomes fluorescent post-emulsifiable lipophilic, and it goes on and on. In that case, we can get 8 method from this. So that is for the method. For the form, though form does not determine the technique. Form is just to tell us the available types of developer. But what usually determines the technique when you are naming technique is the type and method. So when you are talking about the form, we have the dry powder. This was the first, historically, this is the first method that was invented for applying your developer. So after applying your penetrant, you remove your excess penetrant. What you just do is just dust the developer, which is in the form of powder, and the powder will draw out, just like having your chalk. You put your chalk on the surface, and if there is excess dye, in those days it used to be dye. That's why it's called dye penetrant. It's the chalk will suck out in a blotting action. You bring out the excess penetrant that has entered into the crack or whatever discontinuity that is there. From the dry powder, it was the next was developed is the water soluble. Then the water the suspendable, the non-aqueous, and then lastly we have the special developers for, which is a combination of a whole lot of methods. If you now want to determine the best type of developer that you want to use, it is determined by a whole lot of factors, which could be dependent on the size of the material that you want to inspect, the intricate nature of the material. For example, if I decide to put, let's say I put powder method, the dry powder method, very difficult for the powder to go into certain areas. So I'll be better off if I use non-aqueous in this. Then also, it also depends on the manufacturing method. Some materials are more favorable to certain types of developer. So you need to look into all of this when choosing the form of developer that you want to use. So basically, this is the classification of the penetrant testing method. To conclude, we'll look at what we call the sensitivity of a penetrant method. Sensitivity. The sensitivity normally goes from half to 4. So in between half and 4, you have 1, you have 2, you have 3. As you go down, the sensitivity becomes higher. So half is very low, and 4 is very high. Of course, 2 becomes medium, and 1 becomes medium, 2 becomes high. The most commonly available materials usually fall into the sensitivity of 3. And for very sensitive materials, when you are looking for very fine, thin crack, you use a high sensitivity, like when you are looking at inspecting aircraft parts. And we should also have it in mind that when you are looking at aerospace inspection, you don't use visible at all during the inspection. You're always using the fluorescent, because in that form of inspection for penetrant test for aerospace, you require very, very high sensitivity, and in that class you require sensitivity of 4, which is very high. So now we will practicalize this method just to get more insights on them. Now we will demonstrate this technique for PT testing. For us to do that, we are going to use a three test base for illustrating this. So we have our typical plate weld, which makes it very easy for us to clean and work on. We have this nut, a bolt rather. You can see cleaning of this will be a little bit more difficult because of these intricate edges. Then the next one will be this casted material. With each of these, we'll look at the best PT techniques that apply to them. Basically, for penetrant testing, you do your pre-cleaning, your application of your penetrant, removal of your excess penetrant, and before you develop. Of course, when you apply your penetrant, you allow for some time for the penetrant to enter into the material, which is your dwell time. For our pre-cleaning, there are lots of methods for performing pre-cleaning. We can do our mechanical cleaning, in which case we use a wire brush, or in some cases you can manually scrape the surface, but not in a way that it will affect the surface you are testing. So your wire brushing falls under your mechanical cleaning. Then we have the chemical cleaning, in which case we can use our solvent cleaner. And we also have here, we have our thinner. We can use thinner also for our pre-cleaning. So those two methods falls under chemical cleaning. Then you have your ultrasonic cleaning, where you put your test piece in an ultrasonic cleaner and electronically power the ultrasonic cleaner, and it cleans the material. That gives a very fine cleaning. Then we have our vapor degreasing, where we use steam to wash materials, especially materials that have oily dirt, like a grease. Then we can also use our normal steam washing for cleaning. All these methods, they all apply to your cleaning. If you look at this item that is very intricate, trying to squeeze in rag into these edges for cleaning, it's normally going to be very difficult, especially if you want to really view the internals and perform tests on the internals. So for something like this, you can put it into an ultrasonic cleaner and leave it for some time. All the dirt, they will all come out. You can also use your vapor degreasing on this to clean. But for a plate like this that gives you easy access, you can use your manual cleaning method using your chemical cleaner to do your cleaning. After your cleaning, you now look at applying your penetrants. For the purpose of this video, we have three of them here. We have your water-washable penetrant, which is your type A. Now, if you look at it, it's stated clearly that for visible liquid penetrant inspection, which means this is 2A. That is type 2, method A. You can only remove excess penetrant by using your water to wash the excess penetrant. Then the next one is your solvent-removable, which is your type C, and this is for visible. So in this case, we have 2C. So the technique will be 2C. If you look at this third one now, it's a solvent-removable, which is type C, and also post-emulsified fluorescent. Because it is fluorescent, our viewing condition, we are no longer going to be using our visible light, but we're going to be using our UV light for viewing. So that makes this type 1. The type 1 can apply to method B, C, and D. Method B is lipophilic, that's a post-emulsified lipophilic. Type D is post-emulsified hydrophilic, while type C is your usual solvent removable. So this single penetrant can apply for all three techniques. So you can use it for 1B, 1C, 1D technique. And also its sensitivity here is level 3, which is high. Level 4 is very high, but this is level 3. So as an inspector, it's usually advisable that you take a look at what is written on your can while you are testing to know the limitations of your testing kit. Then for this video, we are only going to be using the non-aqueous, which is from C for the development. So we'll start by applying, we won't do much pre-cleaning because I already cleaned before now. Just a short illustration. For water washable, if we apply water washable to this, we can apply water washable to this, or let's apply to flaw instead. When you are performing your test, you definitely leave it for some time to allow it and dwell. Dwell time is dependent on a lot of factors like material type, the temperature, the thickness, and all that. But usually it's between 5 to 15 minutes, depending on what the procedure states or what the standard states. So as the inspector, you need to know your dwell time you are using. For our lipophilic, we can apply and voila for it to dwell. Then for our solvent-removable, we apply this and we allow them to dwell. For the application of a penetrant, for these ones I added penetrant, I did the spray method. There are a whole lot of method of applying penetrant. For an item like this that I applied this type B to now, we can use dipping, whereby we dip it into, let's say this is the penetrant in the pool, we dip it inside and we'll leave it out to drain. We could also use a wire brush because like this whole spray now, you see how messed up this place is and the quantity of penetrants that we are using. So you can just decide to put some quantity somewhere and apply with a brush. You can dab with a rag or something, just dab it on top, but just put enough for it to allow your process to go on. So remove the excess penetrants. For the water washable, what we basically just do, we just use water and we wash off. You see, goes off. The excess penetrant goes off. This is the water washable. So it's very important that you consider your water pressure. Normally, it should be within 15 psi, so that you don't excessively wash out the penetrant and remove those ones that are supposed to be in the crack. In the case of our solvent removable, you just get your cleaner. The rule basically is not to apply directly, but first off, you are normally advised to clean off the excess first with a rag. Clean up the excess with a rag. After removing the excess, then you can now apply some quantity of the chemical cleaner to remove whatever is left. This is not a full section to go through the process just to illustrate. In the case of the post-emulsifiable, lipophilic, and hydrophilic, what differentiates it from the other two methods of a penetrant removal, rather, it's it requires an emulsifier. So basically, what does the emulsifier do? So you have your penetrant and you want to remove it with water at the end of the day. But if you just apply water, if we apply water the way this is now, if you apply water on it, you can see that the water does not take it out. So, which means the chemical needs to be emulsified. Emulsification is breaking down of the penetrant into a form that can be removed with water. So, in the case of an hydrophilic emulsifier or hydrophilic emulsifiable penetrant remover, you have an emulsifier that is in this form. Because it is water loving, hydrophilic, for you to use this, you will have to mix it with water. So before usage, normally the container that it comes with will tell you the percentage or the part per volume of water that should be used with a specific volume. In some cases, you just need to measure maybe with the cover of the emulsifier, maybe 1 or 2 pours, and you mix it with a specific quantity of water. Then you have your hydrophilic emulsifier. In the case of lipophilic, you do not add water because it does not work with water. That one, you just use it directly. So after applying your penetrant and allowing it to dwell for your usual dwell time, for hydrophilic, you need to do what we call pre-rinsing. For lipophilic, you do not do pre-rinsing because the penetrant is water loving. When you do pre-rinsing, you just use water, you put water on it to first of all remove excess penetrants. Take note, this is for hydrophilic. For lipophilic, you don't do this. So after doing your pre-rinsing for your hydrophilic, before you now put it into your emulsifier, maximum 30 seconds, because if you leave it more than that time, it's going to remove both the ones that have dissolved into your crack and indications, and you are not going to see anything by the time you develop. In the case of your lipophilic, you are applying the penetrant. After the dwell time, you put it in your lipophilic emulsifier. The same time applies. After removing the excess penetrant, then you now use water. After emulsifying, you now use water to remove what is left of it. Take note, this is not being done properly. This is just an illustration. If you want to do it real, you see that a lot of this will be taken out. All the penetrants will be taken out. After doing that, you will discover that the surface is wet. If you are using your normal non-aqueous developer, if you use it on a water surface like this, a wet surface like this, it's not going to work. So in that case, you need to bring a dryer. For the purpose of the lab, we are using this dryer to dry, but in other cases or industrial application, you can put it in the oven or put it in any other form of drying. But in this case, we just turn on our dryer. When it's dry, you can then apply your developer and the process continues. So if I'm applying developer, for example, then you can leave it to develop in your normal development time. Your type 1, you use your fluorescent light. So if I want to view this, now, I turn off my lights. I will have my UV light. Then if there is any defective area on this material, I view it. So this is type 1. Method B or D, depending on the emulsification you use. You can also use your solvent removable, which is your type C. Your method, which is your method C. Basically, this is a recap of the technique of the penetrant test. I hope you learned something. Thank you.